If you do want to pay attention to genres right out of the gate, and you want to go so far as to tailor your first book, your first novel, to a specific genre, then you need to inform yourself to an extent. There is a school of thought. There's a guy that wrote a book, I believe it's called Right to Market, and he's all into data, and he basically tells you to examine the sort of the backbone of these different genres and categories, and then kind of pick one that you like, but that also crosses over into one that shows a lot of authors having success monetarily. So that's one way to do it. It seems a little sterile. I still think for the first book, I would just write what feels correct. But if you do want to pay attention to genres, and again, literary fiction, short stories, historical fiction, those things typically don't do well. But the top earning genres tend to be romance, science fiction, and mystery and thriller. And I think romance is probably at the top. And romance also includes adult romance, which is a little bit questionable. I think it's thinly disguising kind of adult literature. They lump it under romance. But in any case, that's probably at the top. Science fiction is probably second. There's several different subcategories of science fiction. Right now, one of the hot ones is something that they've called military science fiction. And that's, I guess that it's kind of space wars, sort of Star Wars stuff. The point is you've got to suspend plenty of disbelief for that stuff, but you may be a big fan of it. There's also fantasy, and that's dragons, and then even dragons in outer space and things like that. I personally don't connect any of those genres very well. It would be forcing it for me to try to write one of those, but there's no denying some of those people make a lot of money, and they're not necessarily very good writers, honestly. I've read some of their stuff, and I don't think some of those people that make the big bucks are really not good writers. They're very good marketers, and they get editors and whatever's necessary. But the main thing that they do well, though, is they tell a good story. So it doesn't necessarily have to be written very well. They're just telling a good story, and they get readers that gobble it up, and they can't wait for the next one. So there's something to be said for that. You can't fault that at all. And probably they themselves would admit they're not the greatest literary stylists or anything like that. They're just telling a good story, and more power to them. And again, the other category below those two, a little bit probably mystery and thriller, crime fiction. But something else about genres, readers are very picky, and they get mad if it doesn't fit the genre. So you need to be a little bit careful. Like you get a crime mystery fan, and maybe they read 3 or 4 books a month, or maybe even a lot more than that. There's a lot of ways they can get them free on Amazon Kindle. Now they just kind of gobble these things up, and if you write one, they start yours and they invest their time into it, and it doesn't fit the genre. Maybe it's a mystery thriller, but then you throw in a paranormal element. There's ghosts, and there's maybe something to do with a spaceship or a UFO, or they could get mad, and they could give you a bad review, number one, but they just, you're not accomplishing what you're setting out to do, which is hit your genre, tropes, actually. And tropes is one of those funny words, but in the fiction game, it kind of means, typical themes and devices that are natural to the genre. And then the readers tend to expect these, maybe not consciously, but if they're not there, again, they don't like it. They're not necessarily specific plot points, but certain twists and turns, and again, themes, devices, change of pace, that type of thing, reversals. Those need to be pretty consistent with the top sellers in that genre. So one way to get an idea, if you want to, is to go on Amazon and then search the best sellers in a genre you're interested in. So say you wanted post-apocalyptic science fiction. You go there, you search the bestsellers, and they usually list 100 of them, the top 100 books, and just pick a few. And you could either, just for free, you can read 10%, you can read the look inside on each page, but the right way to do it would be to buy a couple of books and actually read a couple of books if you're serious about that genre, and inform yourself of what the consistent patterns are in the books that do well, and then try to conform your story to those. So that's certainly one way to do it. But again, the look inside and the descriptions on each page, and then even the reader reviews, can give you a good overview of that, what's typical to the genre, and of course the tropes. And then if readers give bad reviews, those are sometimes instructive, because maybe they point out that the author did not hit what they expected, did not hit the plot, the devices and themes and tropes, etc. But again, an example of a mistake might be that you write a book, you label it science fiction, but the characters are all a bunch of high school kids. And so it's essentially a high school drama, like a teen drama with some science fiction elements thrown in. There you'll probably irritate readers who started the book, because they don't want to be reading young adult. Some of them don't care, but some of them don't want to be reading young adult. That would be a young adult, probably categorized in the young adult genre, young adult sci-fi, or young adult subcategory of sci-fi, time travel, something like that. But you got to be careful. You got to kind of hit these things on the nose. And I've made this mistake as well. And I've gotten hammered a few times by reviewers as well, and readers. Another example would be hard science fiction. That's a very specific category, and it involves science, good hard physics and science to back things up, astronomy and so forth. And the voracious readers of that category don't want you making up science. They don't mind that you're writing about the year 2500, but and making and sort of imagining what things might be like, but they want you to root it in principles of hard science. So you don't do that, and you stick the book in that genre, you're probably going to get hammered. But the bottom line about the genres, though, from a positive point of view, is you do have voracious readers. So if you write in a genre and you hit the right category, and I guess you'd have to say if you hit the right tropes. I kind of cringe at that word, and trying to manufacture your book. But if you hit all that stuff, then you do have voracious readers that become fans, and they latch on, and they can't wait for the next book, and they will just gobble them up. So that is one advantage of genres. Again, the first book, I would just write what feels correct. Worry about the genres later on. But if you do have an idea right now that pertains to genre fiction, then you're well advised to zero in on it, read a few of the bestsellers, and really get a sense of what makes that genre tick. Okay.